Safe to say, I took 2 L's today. The first L is for me believing in the Saints when they completely shit the bed. And then the second one is me losing to Monday Night Bullshit when Cameron Dicker the kicker absolutely saving my opponent's ass again. In fantasy football, of course, and now I'm 2-5. But anyways, welcome back to Grizzly Talks Football. I did make an error last episode. It was the 20th episode. I cannot believe we made it that far. Now we're at episode 21. Man, we're rolling. Anyways, today's episode is, of course, Week 7 NFL reactions. And I'm actually happy about this week of the NFL because I actually got 12 out of 15 correct this week. So, yippee! Anyways, if you are new to this series, I will make sure to leave a link in the description with the full playlist there so you guys can watch every single episode so you're all caught up. And you can also view there for future videos whenever I post them. If you haven't already, make sure you hit the red subscribe button and be sure to hit the bell so you don't miss a video. And be sure to get this video liked so you can see more videos like this one. Without further ado, let's go to the games. Kicking off this week, we had Thursday Night Football where the Broncos absolutely bludgeoned the Saints 33-10. I gotta be honest, I completely overestimated this Saints team. I did not think they were gonna suck this bad. And now that is 5 straight losses for the Saints after starting 2-0. Yikes. Bo Nix had himself a decent game with 16-26 for 164 yards through the air, and he even had 75 yards on the ground. But we all know the saving grace was Javonte Williams with 88 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. Receiving was led by Troy Franklin, who had 5 catches for 50 yards, and Cortland Sutton had a big old goose egg on that stat line. He was also another guy that pissed me off in fantasy. The defense of the Broncos had 6 total sacks, and they forced 2 fumbles from Spencer Rattler, and one of them was returned by Cody Barton for a touchdown. And a big shout out to Will Lutz for making all 4 of his field goals and scoring 15 points. As for New Orleans, Spencer Rattler didn't have a terrible game except for the 2 fumbles. He did have 25-35 for 170 yards, but Jake Haener threw the only touchdown for the New Orleans Saints. Rushing game was abysmal. I mean, their top 2 runners on the depth chart got a total of 10 carries and 27 yards. The leader in receiving was Cedric Wilson Jr., who had 6 catches for 57 yards and the garbage time touchdown from Haener. I think the injuries have finally caught up to New Orleans. 0 sacks from this entire defense, and they just could not stop the run. They couldn't get a turnover. They couldn't even get to the quarterback. This was a monster win for Denver. For them to get above 500, dominated both sides of the ball. New Orleans needs to start finding their quarterback of the future. Next up, we got the London game where the Patriots lost to the Jags 32-16. This was only a good game because both of these teams were terrible. And somehow New England was even worse. I wasn't surprised. But at the end of the day, you could not point the finger at Drake May. He had a heck of a game with 276 yards and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Rushing game was atrocious. The leader receiving was Hunter Henry, who had 8 catches for 92 yards, and the only 2 touchdowns came from KJ Osborne and Jermichael Hasty. Solid game tackling from Kyle Duggar and Anthony Jennings, but other than that, they couldn't get a sack or a turnover, and they just ran into the Jacksonville offensive line. Run blocking, amazing for Jacksonville. Let me just say, Drake May out-dueled Trevor Lawrence. Lawrence had under 200 yards, 15-20 for a touchdown. He played it safe this game. But the main man was Tank Bigsby, who had 118 yards and 2 touchdowns this game. And also, Brian Thomas continues to be elite with 5 catches, 89 yards, and a score. No turnovers, but they did get 2 sacks. One was from Javon Walker, and the other was from Devin Lloyd. Wow. Oh yeah, and before I forget, Parker Washington, a Penn State guy, I guess it is a rookie or something like that, he got a 96-yard punt return for a touchdown that contributed well to the victory. This Tank Bull, well, the real winner is the Patriots, but Jacksonville had an amazing game in London. I told you guys, the London Magic isn't dead. Up next, we had the best game by far from Sunday, we had the Lions beating the Vikings 31-29 in the first game at 1 p.m. Don't take this loss as the end of the world. You guys are still a good team. Like, even with this loss, you guys are still good. You just had to run into the Lions, who are looking like the best team in the NFC. Jared Goff was near perfect with 22-25 for 280 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs lit up the scoreboard with 7.7 yards a carry, 116 yards, and 2 scores. Amon-Ra St. Brown had himself a good game with 8 catches, 112 yards, and a score, with the other touchdown going to Khalif Raymond. And Sam Laporta only had 1 catch, but it was a 25-yard reception, so that's not terrible. Defensively, it was more of the fact that they got 4 sacks and an interception from Brian Branch. As far as Minnesota goes, Sam Darnold also was near perfect with 22-27 for 260 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. Aaron Jones had a great day rushing with 93 rushing yards and a touchdown of his own. No surprise here, but Justin Jefferson led the team receiving with 7 catches, 81 yards, and a score. But Jalen Nailor and Jordan Addison also combined for 7 catches and 142 yards, so they had a solid game too. There were 4 sacks from the Vikings defense as well, including 2 sacks from Van Ginkel, and there was also a fumble return by Ivan Pace for the defensive touchdown in this game. Jesse Bates kicked the day's only field goal of the game at the end of the game with 10 seconds left to win the game for Detroit. But let's not discredit Will Riker, who had a very good game, making all 3 of his field goals and scoring 11 points. A battle between 2 teams in the best division right now in football. This was a great game, and man did it sell out. A lot of tickets. I hope these 2 meet again and have another instant classic like this one. Up next, we have the Titans getting shut down by the Bills 34-10. Titans had a very good first half, being up 10-7, but they were up 10-0 at one point, and Buffalo ended up scoring 34 unanswered points. It was good while it lasted, Tennessee. Mason Rudolph had an okay game. He had 25 of 40, 215 yards, a touchdown, and unfortunately an interception. Pollard's rushing game wasn't as good as it used to be, but he still was able to break 60 yards rushing. The receiving game was led by Chikokongwo, who had 4 catches for 50 yards, and the only touchdown went to Nick Westbrook-Akine. And of course, only 1 sack in this game by Arden Key, because they couldn't really get to the ball carriers at all. As far as the Bills, Josh Allen had a superb game, 21 of 33 for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. We also had rushing touchdowns by Ray Davis and James Cook in this game. Receiving was led by Keon Coleman, who had 4 catches for 125 yards, with the touchdowns going to Amari Cooper, who got his first touchdown as a Buffalo Bill, and also Ty Johnson got a receiving touchdown. Wow. So far, Amari Cooper's trade to the Bills actually has worked out well for Buffalo. There were a total of 3 sacks in this game. There was also an interception by Damar Hamlin, but shout out also to Dorian Williams, who had himself a solid game again in tackling. He is one of the best tacklers certainly in the NFL right now. We expected this from Buffalo. Hey Bills, take a cookie and leave, please. Like, nobody's really impressed. Everybody knew you guys were going to win this game. Nobody just didn't really expect the first half to go as it did. A goose egg in the second half, Tennessee. I think we should have just seen this coming. Up next, we had a bar burner that was won by Indianapolis over the Dolphins, 16-10. God, this game was awful. Ugh. Tim Boyle had some snaps for some stupid reason, and I found out his college stats from a guy named Tyler TNT. Man, 1 touchdown, 13 picks in college? I wonder what he did to get himself a job at the NFL. Anyways, the 2 quarterbacks combined for 15 of 26 for 161 yards, and Tyler Huntley even threw a touchdown in this game. Rushing game was very solid, with Achane and Mostert combining for 127 rushing yards. Arthur Smith would be very proud of Jonnu Smith, who led the team in receiving, no doubt about it, 7 catches for 96 yards and the only touchdown of the game for Miami. No sacks or picks in this game, but Anthony Richardson fumbled the ball once, and Zach Sealer was able to get a recovery. It was like a bubbled snap, and Sealer was able to get on top of it, and it was a turnover. the only one in the game for Miami's defense. Anthony Richardson did not play well at all. He had 10 of 24 for 129 yards. He led the team in rushing with 56 yards. Rushing game was solid, but Tyler Goodson had the only touchdown, so rushing game is not terrible without Jonathan Taylor. Receiving was led by Michael Pittman, who had 3 catches for 63. I believe E.J. Speed was injured for this game, and Grant Stewart stepped up. Stepped up. He had 11 tackles, and Zaire Franklin had a good game. So did Nick Cross, Julian Blackman, and Jalen Jones. There were 2 sacks in this game as well. A big word of advice, Indianapolis: start Joe Flacco. He's your best chance of winning games. Up next, we had the Seahawks take down the Falcons in Atlanta 34-14. Unfortunately, the winning streak is over, but you had to have seen this coming. Seattle's still a really good team. Geno Smith had a solid game with 200 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air. Kenneth Walker had himself a rushing touchdown with 69 rushing yards. Nice. And Walker even had himself a receiving touchdown, and the leader receiving was DK Metcalf with 4 catches for 99 yards and a score, with Noah Fant also having 4 catches for 65. May I ask, where was this when he was in Denver? Obviously, there were 3 sacks and also 2 interceptions by Kobe Bryant and Julian Love in this game. Very solid game for both sides of the ball. Kirk Cousins had a very rocky game with 24 of 35 for 230 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks, and Michael Penix threw a pass. Wow. Bijan had another solid game with 100 yards and a touchdown of his own. The leading receiver was Kyle Pitts, who had 7 catches for 65, but Drake London had 6 catches, 63 yards, and the only receiving touchdown in the game for Atlanta. Unfortunately, no turnovers, but we did get 1 sack from James Smith-Williams, but that was pretty much it. There was nothing really good except for 1 sack the entire game for our defense. GG Seattle, you guys were obviously the much better team heading into this game, and we're still pretty solid. We just need to figure out to get a win over Tampa Bay, who doesn't have Mike Evans or Chris Godwin. I will get to their Monday night game when I get to that Monday night game. Up next, we had the Texans losing to the Packers to a game-winning field goal, 24-22. But I gotta be honest, this game was a little weird. The weird part was that CJ Stroud had only 86 passing yards the entire game. What? How is Houston going to waste Joe Mixon's performance in this game? 115 yards on 25 carries and 2 touchdowns. Their leading receiver was Dalton Schultz, who recorded 1 catch for 28 yards, with Stephon Diggs having 5 catches for only 23 yards. Safe to say, they need Nico Collins bad. At least the defense came to play, with Neville Hewitt, Mr. WWE moves, having an interception. Same with Kalen Bullock with 3 sacks in this game as well, excluding 1 from Will Anderson. Dang, and Danielle Hunter. As for the Packers, Jordan Love had a solid game, 220 yards to 24-33 for 3 touchdowns and 2 picks. Jacobs led the rushing game with 12 carries for 76 yards. Oh yeah, and he had his first receiving touchdown this game, 212 catches. That was his first receiving touchdown that he caught from Jordan Love. Speaking of receiving, the receiving corps leader was Romeo Doubs with 8 catches for 94 yards. Like I said, Josh Jacobs had a touchdown. So did Dontavian Wicks and Tucker Kraft, who, by the way, I picked up on waivers. And he did me a solid by getting a score, so I'm proud of him for getting that. No picks for this defense, but they got 4 sacks in this game, including 2 from Eric Wilson, and Xavier McKinney also had a sack. Interesting, with Rashawn Gary getting the other. This was a really good game all around. Great win, Packers, over a really good Houston team. But CJ, this isn't the beginning of what I think it will be, is it? Up next, we have the Bengals beating the Browns in the close game, 21-14. The only reason why it was close is because Jameis Winston threw a garbage time touchdown in the end. And unfortunately, Deshaun Watson is out for the rest of the season with a torn Achilles. On the day, Joe Burrow had a pretty decent game, 180 yards for 2 touchdowns, a 15-25 passing. Rushing game was beyond absolute horrible. And receiving was led by the two-headed monster at the wideouts, T. Higgins with 4 catches, 82 yards and a score, and Jamar Chase with 5 catches, 55 yards and also a score. And the Bengals defense was able to get 4 sacks, including 2 from Hendrickson and 1 from Sam Hubbard, who also had a pick along with Geno Stone. Geno is beating the bad safety allegations, at least for now. As far as the Browns, yeah, they had 3 different quarterbacks. Deshaun Watson didn't play that bad until he suffered his season-ending injury. DTR was terrible throwing the ball, 11 to 24 for 82 yards, 2 picks. And Jameis Winston threw the only passing touchdown of the game for the Browns. Sure, DTR led the team in rushing with 44 yards, but the only touchdown, the real only highlight of the entire rushing game was Nick Chubb in his return to the NFL after his injury, getting a rushing touchdown. Good for him. Receiving was led by Cedric Tillman, who had 8 catches for 81 yards, but David Njoku also had 10 catches, 76 yards, and the only receiving touchdown in the game for Cleveland. For the Browns defense, they couldn't force an interception, and they only had 3 sacks in this game. And Myles Garrett was surprisingly quiet in this game. What's going on? The Bengals are still here. They are not out of this in any sort of way. That 0-4 start doesn't matter. It's not about how you start, it's about how you finish, Cincinnati. As for Cleveland, I think it's just time to write off 2024. And the final game of the 1 o'clock slate for Sunday was the Eagles almost blanking the Giants 28-3. This score still haunts me to this day, just almost a decade later. But man, the Eagles absolutely crushed the Giants, and I can't say I'm surprised. Jalen Hurts had 1 touchdown, 114 yards, 10 of 14 through the air, and he also had 2 rushing touchdowns in this game. And the other touchdown on the ground came from Saquon Barkley, who had 176 yards on 10.4 yards to carry and a score. Receiving core, of course, was led by A.J. Brown, who had 5 catches for 89 yards and a touchdown. He was just their main guy in the passing game. And this defense got a grand total of 8 sacks in this game. 2 of them came from the Kobe Dean, and another 2 came from Jalen Carter. I'm still mad that we didn't get Jalen, but I'm pretty happy with Bijan. But that Eagles defense was insane this game. The Giants' offensive line is just terrible. Like, you can't point the finger at Daniel Jones for that. He couldn't have any time in the pocket. As for the Giants, of course, Daniel Jones couldn't even break 100 passing yards in this game. Drew Lock had some passing yards as well. Rushing game was just shut down the entire game. Like I said, the Giants' offensive line played terribly on both sides of the ball this game. And of course, the leading receiver was Malik Neighbors, coming back from injury with 4 catches for 41 yards. And Wan'Dale Robinson also had 6 catches. What? And there were also 5 sacks from the Giants defense, including 2 from Dexter Lawrence. But as much as that is very helpful for them, the rushing game, the Eagles' offensive line was just absolutely solid, and the defense could not stop Saquon for anything. After that atrocious showing against Cleveland, this was a much-needed blowout win for Philly. They needed this blowout badly. Philly is still a playoff contender. Let's just hope they can do anything against Cincinnati. I'm sure they will, because Cincinnati's defense is supposed to be bad. Kicking off the 4 o'clock slate on Sunday, we had a barn burner that was won by the Rams over the Raiders 20-15. I gotta be honest, this game was worse than the Dolphins-Colts game. The 2 quarterbacks, Minshew and Stafford, combined for 0 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. It gets worse though. I will get to that later on. As far as the Raiders goes, AOC went down with the injury. He's going to miss some time. Gardner Minshew stepped in to throw 150 yards and 3 picks. Alexander Madison led the team in rushing, of course, with 92 yards and 4 yards to carry. And I'm pretty sure no one is surprised that Brock Bowers is leading the team in receiving with 10 catches for 93 yards. He is him. He's literally the only guy saving the Raiders from total mediocrity, even though his efforts are really futile because they're not doing very well at all. And the only positives from this game for the Raiders is a sack by Max Crosby and Nate Hobbs getting a pick on Matthew Stafford. As far as the Rams, Stafford had 150 yards, 14-23, and an interception like I said before. Kyron Williams was the only source of points for the Rams offense, 2 touchdowns in this game, 76 rushing yards. The receiving was led by Tyler Johnson and Tutu Atwell, who combined for 10 catches for over 100 yards. There were 2 sacks by the Rams defense. Kobe Durant had a sack and interception, but Jalen McCullough got 2 interceptions against Gardner Minshew. Oh yeah, and Cooper Kupp is coming back. Good for you, Rams. Prepared to get beat by the Minnesota Vikings. It'll be much better when Puka comes back. I promise. Up next, we had the Panthers getting destroyed by the Commanders 40-7. Jaden Daniels went down early in the game, but Marcus Mariota was playing very well. Panthers were just atrocious. Like, Andy Dalton couldn't even break 100 yards, and he also threw 2 picks. The only source of good offense was Chuba Hubbard getting a rushing touchdown. The leading receiver was Jatavian Sanders, who had 6 catches for 61 yards. That's random. And just absolutely nothing from the defense. Shows why the Panthers are the worst team in the NFL right now. As for Washington, like I said, Jaden Daniels went down with the injury, and Marcus Mariota balled out with 200 yards, 18 of 23, and 2 touchdowns this game. Brian Robinson had 71 yards, 5.9 yards to carry, almost 6 yards to carry, and a score. Receiving was led by, you guessed it, Terry McLaurin with 6 catches for 100 yards, and the touchdowns went to the tight ends, Zach Ertz and Ben Sinnott. 2 sacks for Washington's defense, and Dante Fowler even had himself a pick 6 in this game. Good for him. And also there was Emmanuel Forbes, who had the other interception. It was all commies the entire game on both sides of the ball, and they are still the best team in the NFC East right now. I am sure hopeful that Jaden Daniels is okay though. And the final game of the Sunday 4 o'clock slate was having Kansas City beating the 49ers 28-18. Remember the Raiders-Rams game when I said it gets worse? It did. Mahomes and Purdy combined for 0 touchdowns passing and 5 interceptions. The only way these quarterbacks could score is through the run. Don't believe me? Patrick Mahomes had one of his worst games of his career with 150 yards passing and 2 picks. And he had a rushing touchdown along with McCole Hardman and Kareem Hunt, who had 78 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. The receiving corps was led by Noah Gray, who had 4 catches and 66 yards, and Travis Kelce fantasy owners are still pissed. They are still breaking their TVs. 4 catches for 17 yards. Defense only got 1 sack courtesy of George Karlaftis, and 2 interceptions by Roland Wallace and Justin Reed. I'm kidding, there was 3 because of a guy named Jaden Hicks in this game. Great job from the defenses this game. As far as the Niners go, Purdy had 200 yards on 17 of 31, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions. The only touchdowns he got were because he got them on the ground. Jordan Mason had 58 rushing yards. The only source of real offense was the touchdowns by Purdy. Well, at least George Kittle balled out in the receiving corps with 6 catches for 92 yards. And unfortunately, Brandon Ayuk is done for the year with a torn ACL and MCL. So sad. But this isn't the end of the world, San Fran, because you still got Deebo Samuel, you still got Juwan Jennings coming back. Ricky Pearsall doesn't even look that bad either, so yeah, I think you guys are in good hands right now. Of course, there were 2 sacks in this game, one by Leonard Floyd, and there were also 2 interceptions by Charles Lenoir and Kalia Davis, with Fred Warner and Malik Mustafa having solid games tackling the ball carriers. I gotta believe that nobody thought this game would get as ugly as it was passing the ball, because that was a disaster as a QB battle. And this is now 12 straight games, regular and postseason, that the Kansas City Chiefs have won. They can't keep getting away with this, come on! And now on to the Sunday Night Football game, where the Jets lost badly to the Steelers, 37-15. Well, I was wrong about the Steelers. Apparently, they are in good shape right now, even with Russell Wilson's or Justin Fields. And man, Aaron Rodgers struggled against the Steelers defense like I figured he would. He had 276 yards, but a touchdown and 2 picks this game. Ouch. Rushing game was atrocious besides the Breece Hall touchdown. But that's because he led the team in receiving with 6 catches and 103 yards as the running back. What? and the only touchdown of the game for the Jets through the air went to Tyler Conklin. And also, Devontae Adams' first game as a Jet, he only logged in 3 catches. There was literally nothing to be excited about the Jets' defense because they got 1 sack the entire game from McDonald, and that was basically it. On to the Steelers. I do apologize to Russell Wilson for doubting his game because he put up 270 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air. And he got himself a rushing touchdown as well. So he got 3 total touchdowns in this game. And Najee Harris had 100 yards and a score of his own. George Pickens' fantasy owners are really happy with 5 catches, 111 yards and a touchdown, with the other touchdown going to Van Jefferson. I was actually debating between getting Tucker Kraft or Pat Freiermuth, but I'm glad I got Kraft because Pat got only 2 catches this game. TJ Watt was surprisingly quiet in this game, but they did get a sack from Ogunjobi, and when TJ Watt goes silent, there's a new guy that has to step up, and his name this game was Beanie Bishop, who got 2 picks. Mr. Unlimited has done it again, and now the Steelers are looking very comfortable in that division. Well, they still have the Ravens and the Bengals to deal with. And I figured this was going to be a time where we say that the Jets are still the Jets. Kicking off the Monday night doubleheader, we had the Ravens outlasting the Bucks 41-31. I say outlast only because of the scoreboard, but disregard that. Other than the 4th quarter, the Ravens dominated this entire game. Lamar had himself 5 touchdowns and 280 passing yards in this game, including 52 rushing yards on the ground. And King Henry, 169 yards on the ground, 11 yards a carry. Shit. And y'all really thought Henry was washed? Yeah, no, he is still him. The receiving corps was led by Rashad Bateman, who had 4 catches, 121 yards, including a 49-yard touchdown. Other touchdowns were 2 for Andrews, 1 for Justice Hill out of the backfield, and same with Derrick Henry out of the backfield in the 4th quarter. Roquan Smith had a solid game tackling the ball carriers. There were 3 sacks by the Ravens defense and 2 picks from Marlon Humphrey. I in fact saw one of them that Baker Mayfield should have thrown that ball away. Instead, he threw it right to Marlon's hands. If it wasn't for the 4th quarter, Baker Mayfield had a pretty bad game, but he ended up having a very solid game at the end. 370 yards of 31 of 45, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks. Rushing game was terrible except for a Bucky Irving touchdown. And receiving was led by Cade Otton, who had 8 catches and 100 yards. Rachaad White also had 6 catches for 71 yards and 2 touchdowns. Mike Evans had the other touchdown, but Mike Evans reactivated his hamstring injury, and in the 4th quarter, Chris Godwin suffered a bad dislocated ankle injury, and he looks to be out for the rest of the year. He was carted off the field with the air cast. It said that he was going to be ready for 2025, so he's either coming back for the playoffs or he's going to miss the rest of the year. Either way, this is terrible news for the Bucs. I'm feeling so bad for Godwin because he was extremely good this year. Defense couldn't stop the run, but they were able to get 2 sacks, courtesy of Antoine Winfield and Yaya Diaby. The final score doesn't tell the true story. The Ravens completely owned this game until the very end, but come on, they were playing garbage time at this point. However, when healthy, these 2 teams are elite. I say when healthy because the Bucs may have just lost both of their best receivers to injuries. So, Jalen McMillan, Sean Tucker, Sterling Shepard, you better step up. Including you, Bucky and Rashad. And the final game this week was between the Chargers and the Cardinals, with the Cardinals kicking a last-second field goal again. 17-15 the final. This game pissed me off because the Chargers couldn't do shit except for kick field goals. I heard that Jalen Reagor had a fumble as well, but Justin Herbert 350 yards but no touchdowns? How? Rushing game was completely dog shit. The receiving corps was led by Will Dissly, who had 8 catches for 81 yards, and Josh Palmer had 63 yards on 4 catches. What the hell? Oh yeah, and like I said, Jalen Reagor had a 41-yard catch, but he fumbled the ball through the end zone. And there was also nothing exciting from the defense except Tier Tart getting the interception. Kyler Murray got 2 total touchdowns, 1 through the air and 44-yard rushing touchdown. Like in around the 4th quarter or 3rd quarter, something like that, second half. James Conner had himself 100 yards rushing. Receiving was led by Trey McBride and Connor with 51 yards each on 7 total catches. Marvin Harrison only got 3 catches, but the only touchdown went to Greg Dortch. And there were also 2 sacks in this game by Naquan Jones and... Oh no, there were 3 sacks, excuse me. Stills and Still. Dante Stills and Ben Still got sacks as well. And when I said the Chargers couldn't do anything except kick field goals, I meant to. Look at this shit. 5 field goals, all the points in the game, and they still lost. Dicker's 21 points lost me the game in fantasy football, and like I said before, I am 2-5. I'm gonna steal a quote from Urinating Tree real quick. Fuck you, Spanos. And that is going to do it for this episode of Grizzly Talks Football. If you have enjoyed this episode, be sure to give this a like. Be sure to hit the red subscribe button. And make sure to hit the bell so you don't miss a video. Till next time, I will see you guys soon. Peace!